Welcome to Corpse Club, the official podcast of DailyDead.com. I'm your co-host, Jonathan James, and today I'm here with Milko Davis, Michael Moras, and we're talking Ghosters Phantom Patrol. We're sponsored by this film, but we're also going to be talking, and we're going to be talking about the making of Ghosters. Ghosters. We're going to be talking about all of that good stuff, but we're also going to be talking about supernatural horror films. I think that one of the things that I've enjoyed about Ghosters and that I've enjoyed about like the resurgence of films that are influenced or inspired by supernatural horror films or Ghostbusters is that they have a lot of heart, they're a lot of fun, and I can definitely say that about this film as well. And so we're going to talk to these filmmakers to learn more about them as horror fans. We're going to learn about the making of the film, and we're going to see where it takes us. And again, so thank you to the both of you for being here today. I think, one of the things that I always like to do is just learn more about like you as people, you as horror fans. So, we'll start with you, Milko, but just, can you tell us a little bit about, maybe what was your first horror movie or what got you excited about horror movies? I think everybody has something that kind of like got them into the genre. And I'm wondering what it was for you.
It's kind of interesting because I was born in Zurich, Switzerland. And yeah, when I remember I was 7 years old flying from Europe to California where I would grow up. And the first movie that I ever saw, and I couldn't speak a word of English, but I was blown away, was Darby O'Gill and the Little People. It was like a Disney film. And it had a bunch of visual effects. I didn't know anything about that, but it just caught me. That it was like Disney was like a magical place for me. And I just started developing an interest in film because I was already like drawing pictures as a young kid, trying to make flip books. I don't know if you remember, but the little flip books you draw kind of a progressive animation that
Oh,
you,
yeah.
yeah. So I was already doing that like when I was like really young, and it just caught me up into this whole deal when I finally settled in California and grew up. Obviously, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg all had a great effect on just the interest of film. I bought into it. I said, this is what I want to do. And when I learned more about it, it kind of stuck. It stuck with me, started developing skills.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you brought up Disney because, that may not be the first thing that people think of, but, honestly for me, like if I go back to it, like I was drawn to Fantasia, to that big, the big devil at the end of Fantasia, or the dragon with the green flame in Sleeping Beauty. So like I can also say that there definitely was, a draw for me when it came to Disney films on like the darker side of things and more fantastical. So that's pretty interesting. And how about you, Michael? What kind of like brought you into this? What was something that kind of wowed you when you were younger?
I remember being a kid. The first two that I can remember, I remember going to see Jaws. My mom took us as a family to the drive-in because she wanted to be able to scream. And I remember with my friends, we were going to make this movie. We're in what, fourth grade, and we're drawing plans of how we're going to remake Jaws shot for shot. The second one I remember was when Alien came out, and I was underage, but it kept getting these rave reviews as the best sci-fi horror movie of all time. So my mom took me as a minor, and I love how they did. I love in the first one, and actually both those movies, you see the villain very little. I love the suspense. I love the buildup. I love the anticipation of something's coming to happen.
It's interesting because our listeners right now are going to be like, I can't believe it, because what they know is that my all-time favorite movie is Alien. If I can sneak talking about Alien into one of our podcast episodes, even if it's not related, I'll do it. So you are preaching to the choir here. Yeah, it is. I bugged my mom until she got the VHS tapes. We watched it. We watched them in reverse order, which I was way too young, but I didn't mind. So I saw Aliens and I saw Alien, but yeah, those were just game changers in terms of what they were able to do, and kind of opening my mind to in terms of what was possible with cinema. So, we talked about these, foundational movies, and when it came to, when it came to Ghosters, obviously, you know, people will draw like comparisons to, Ghostbusters and other supernatural films. What was your guys' relationship? And again, I'll start with you, Milko, to Ghostbusters. Was that a big film for you growing up as well? When you were, looking at this film, was that a huge, focal point and inspiration? Yeah, why don't we start there?
It's it's kind of interesting you bring that up because I think for the last 10 years, Michael, myself, we've gotten involved in almost a picture a year, which is kind of really cool when you look at like the timeline. But it seems like without even knowing it, we're just building this retro brand. And that is influenced by like what Michael said. All those movies that he saw in the past, including myself, we just married all that in. We loved it so much that the people tend to forget what I think was true cinema and true experience was I feel like and we're obviously an older generation, but like we're making movies that I think people haven't fully experienced, especially the young crowds, and they actually like it. They don't know what it is, but that retro thing, it was always there through the 80s, and that's how we make our movies is pretty much like as if we were in the 80s. You're always limited in technology when your budgets kind of corner you, and you tend to film it that way because everything is more like aesthetic. It's practical than heavy CGI. So like movies like Star Wars, obviously, at Ghostbusters, they all influenced me. Jaws influenced me. And we just adopted that, and we'll come up with an idea a year. Michael and I'll pitch it back and forth. And this movie was made like 4 years ago. And it just, yeah, it was heavily influenced by Ghostbusters and Abbott and Costello because we had the two security guards. But
I didn't even think about that. That's a great call out, though. I mean, I love the Abbott and Costello films.
they all evolved like into they remember my favorite Abbott and Costello was the monster flicks they made with Dracula and Frankenstein. Those were some of my favorite movies that they were in, Bud Abbott, Luke Costello. But yeah, as far as like the origins of what we do is just pulled from our childhood into what we make now.
Yeah, anything, Michael, you wanted to add?
What I'll add is Milk and I banter ideas around, and we'll get an idea and we'll write a couple pages, or we'll do a one pager, and then we'll start a script and don't know where it's going. Then Milk will get another idea and we'll come up with something completely different. I think Ghosters came out of that too, that we were working on a different script and I was giving him feedback. And he goes, "Don't be mad." Oh, dear God, here we go. And he goes, "I started something else." And I think those are the best scripts where he can sit down and has the whole beginning, middle, end, has the whole thing. And he's so excited about it. And then I come in and fix plot holes or explain away anything that doesn't make sense or fix dialogue and script it, or what else can we put in, or how do we get here to there without the tropes, that it's something new, it's something different. So it might start with an idea of like, let's do something like Ghostbusters, but by the time we get done, it's something completely different. And it's fun to go through and look at the script or the idea at the beginning and then what we end up with at the end, because they're usually radically different. It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I do love is like the magic of the filmmaking process, and I think one of the things that I have noticed is that it doesn't matter the the budget or the scale of the film, that the place they started at the beginning, when they start page one, to where they end up by the time the finished film is edited and all that, it can be quite different in an interesting and fascinating way. That's why I always say that filmmaking is like alchemy, is that there's not one way to do it. Obviously the two of you have really collaborated on a number of projects together, and I know we're talking about Ghosters, but obviously there have been others as well. And so, how did you first, because I do want to get into the making of Ghosters in more detail, but how did you first get together and just say, hey, we're going to start making films together? Like, how did this keep, because it seems like you have now a steady clip of films that you've been working on or that are coming up. So, like, how did you just decide, hey, like, we're going to start getting into this? How did that snowball start to roll in a good way? Because I think there's a lot of folks out there that, want to make films. They're influenced certainly by some of the same things like films of the '80s and Spielberg and Lucas, but they're not able to kind of get the ball rolling. So how have you two been so successful with this?
I'll start this one because Milko was making movies before I got there. We started with a movie called Tsunami, and he brought my wife in to be the reporter because she's a public speaker. And so I got to come on set. I got to see her film her scene. And I was supposed to come back later as a zombie, but was away when he filmed the zombie scenes at the end. So a year or so later, my wife gets a text message going, we're looking for people who can swim or dive. So I wrote back and said, dive is in scuba dive or dive like off a board. And they're like, yes. I said, okay, I can do both. So I got brought into a movie called Merwitches and got to be on the set one whole day, watch all that process. And then there's another scene in there too. But then as Milko started writing the next film, he put military in it. So he goes, can you look at the script and make sure the military dialogue and jargon and actions are accurate? I spent 20 years in the Air Force. So I did that. And then he came back and goes, hey, can you help with making costumes for the mercenaries? And I had a whole bunch of old BDUs, which they don't even wear anymore. And I said, well, sure. And then he goes, so can you make an outfit for the warlord? So there's a joke. There's an Easter egg in that was Jurassic Thunder. The warlord is actually wearing my ribbon rack, my medal rack, because everybody said I look like a third world dictator. So when we had a third world dictator, I put my medal rack on him. But because the actors were there wearing the outfits that we had built, I got into production management and then helping with the script. And then at the end, making the script match the dialogue so that it could be used for subtitles. So that's where I got really brought in full time. So after that is he's writing the next scripts. It was, hey, we need you to look at this, or what about this, or what's in the realm of the possible, or who do you know at work that you can bring in as actors or whatnot. And so that's where it's gone. That's where it became from cameo to co-writing the scripts.
Yeah, that's what do you call it? That's fascinating, and the same thing too that I see a lot of times when it comes to productions like this is you got to be scrappy, you got to wear many hats, and so it's interesting to see how that's gone.
Well, one of the nice things is Milk and I work very well together. He's more the artist, I'm more the project manager. So he's worrying about the artistic shots and the feeling, and I'm worried about time and food and props. So it works very well that we're focused on each other things and we respect each other, that we respect what the other person's doing and needs so that we get through it. And as we've made movies, we've had people come and go, and some it's like, we'll never work with them again. Other ones were like, we like these people, let's come back. So luckily, Milk and I have clicked and just kept going.
Yeah, I got to say, with the entire, to include with what Michael just said, when we made Ghosters Phantom Patrol, that was 4 years ago. And it was a struggle because we had launched that.
COVID.
Right. Yeah, it was right during the pandemic, and we filmed right through it, which is kind of crazy, but it happened. And we had some of the actors, unfortunately, had to back out situations, So technically, Ghosters was a dead deal because we had lost the entire script. Like Michael said, everything we write turns out to be completely different when we deliver it. This was like a football play. Two of our actors had to split. So we had to film an entire sequence of just making it make sense on the last night that we knew we had them. And it just totally transformed the script into something else. And it's happened again with the newer one that we just made. But I think what it's trained us to do is become more of like engineers and dealing with the the limitation of budget, understanding production, and not dropping the ball. It's like we became engineers in a sense, and knowing the fabric of putting something together. No production ever goes as planned. You always have situations occur. I think what's happened for us is because of the beat downs of not enough time to do something or not enough money, you become really creative and you manage. And if you have that skill set, anybody can pick up a camera and do that as long as they have that. This is such an in-depth knowledge base you have to have in filmmaking. It's not just about writing a good script or writing a script in general. There's also understanding how you film it, have backup plans, because time eats up. You'll look at your time and you'll say 12 noon, and then the next time you look down, it's already 5 o'clock. Because you're so immersed in production. I know I'm speaking a long circle here about developing script and production, but Michael and I have been through that over and over and over, and I think that's what makes it easier for us to make the films. Is we can roll with the punches now. It's like, having done so many productions, we can kind of roll with any issue that comes in and just rewrite it on the spot and make it work.
Yeah, it definitely seems like, that's kind of like one of the especially with productions like this, it allows you to be scrappier, and you learn how to kind of pivot. Not everything has to be perfect. On the day you can, as long as the end of the day, you're able to put together that finished film. It's what do you call it? It's definitely a helpful skill to to have. I did want to talk a little bit about the ghosts in this film because obviously, being a supernatural film and whatnot, I think, a movie, when someone who's not necessarily familiar with the title, as they start watching it, like a movie like this can kind of maybe like live and die on its ghosts and its effects. And I do want to say that I think you have some incredible ghosts. And I think honestly, it's not something that everyone does well. So I was curious if either one of you could talk about your approach to the supernatural in Ghosters and how you also approached creating those effects, because I think they look pretty incredible.
You want to take this one, Michael, or me?
Oh, that's you, Milko.
Okay. Like I said, Disney, I wanted this movie to kind of appeal to a broad audience. I don't think there's very many movies out where family can sit together, and it didn't have to be like a cutesy Hallmark movie. But I noticed, like, as time has moved on, there are a lot of movies that are just distinctly rated R, and they're very adult oriented, and they're parents that want to limit what kids see. And so that cuts a broad audience away. Like, a larger audience will be cut in half, because if you make a rated R film, now you're just relying on that audience. So with Ghosters, Phantom Patrol, I wanted it to appeal like Ghostbusters, where it's more cartoony ghost. And I've the good friends at Atmos Effects, which was a company that designs a lot of digital.
Oh yeah, I know that. I know them. Yeah.
Yeah, I've while I was developing my skills for movie making, I ended up meeting a lot of people in the Halloween industry, and I would end up doing scenic development for haunted houses, like just real creative. That's where I got my influence on set design, visuals, lighting. That honestly, it was like a training camp for me. I would just meet people going to conventions. Because obviously, like, I look at the haunt business really delivers through for a lot of movie making, because they use illusions, and just like the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland has multiple illusions that filmmakers would use in film. So back to the orientation of the essence of like making it feel more Disney than just have a bloodbath of ghosts screaming and scaring the holy crap out of people. We just want to kind of set it back, saying, hey, make it a ride experience. Make it like you're riding a ride at Disneyland. And so that's hopefully what we achieved with this film. It was greatly influenced by a Disney aspect.
Yeah, so now I have some questions about this because I find the haunted attraction industry really fascinating. And then when you brought up Atmos, so did you leverage Atmos as a company, or did some of the folks work on it? Like, how did that? I'm curious to I'd like to learn a little bit
But
more about that.
yeah, so like the development of characters, because it's part of a haunt business, you're able to really develop, like at haunted houses, they have what I would consider the elements to create a really cool event. So when you look at like the haunt business on its own, there's I'm not trying to promote, but there's a an event that happens once a year in St. Louis, Missouri called Trans World Halloween
Yeah, yeah,
Show.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, you walk through there and it's Disneyland. I mean, every aisle you look at, this is not like Spirits Halloween stuff. These are people that are selling content for people to use on business. It becomes like a business venture. It's $1 billion industry. When you go, I've been to these a couple of times. My wife and I had been gone together once, and we actually sold some of our own products because I was already involved in the haunt industry at the time. And you just meet so many people, artistic people. It's like, you got to do this for movies, and they actually do. In fact, I'm talking to a guy right now that develops some really interesting makeup effects, let's say. And he's all about it. This guy donated, well, he didn't donate. He allowed the usage of a Winnie the Pooh horror mask for this movie called Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey.
Yeah, yeah.
So people shop this stuff. They shop it with the intent of making movies. I asked, I think the guy's name is George at Immortal Mask, that does these fabulous like silicone masks. They just live on you. You just put on a mask. You just maybe spend $700 on a mask where you would have to spend $10,000 for a makeup artist to do the same thing. So it becomes kind of a, yeah, it's an expensive mask, but then people are using it in their films. And that's my intention in the future with the project. But from what I understand, Winnie the Pooh, this guy had created a horror mask of Winnie the Pooh. This filmmaker, I don't know enough about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. I'm not trying to promote them. I want to promote me. But they uh, they managed to get the mask. They bought it. I talked to the designer of it. He didn't know what was going on. They're making a video. Well, that wasn't a video. That became a movie. And it's kind of a unified experience. All these people know, hey, there are filmmakers. These are not haunters now. These are filmmakers walking through these aisles.
Yeah.
You bet. That's how it happens. These people sell to another market now, which is interesting. It's not just the haunt business, it's the movie making business of haunting.
Well, that's really interesting because I find it really fascinating, and it's that's out of all the kind of like different aspects that I know in the filmmaking process and different things going on in the horror community, I wasn't sure how much that went on within the haunt community, which is in its own kind of world too. Um, so yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I think one of the helpful things about hopefully our listeners who are hearing this from you is that this will give them some ideas because I certainly when I think about movies being made, you think of like concept art, you think of them having their their makeup effects or special effects team and like designing the masks and things like that. But it didn't necessarily dawn on me, although it makes complete sense, that you can go to somewhere like Trans World, or you can go to another event and you can see what different prop makers and costume makers are planning for the haunts, and you can. That's another way, for our listeners, if you're looking to make your own film, it's another way you can kind of get started without having to do everything from scratch. And then also on the Atmos side, it's been a little bit since I've promoted them, but man, I used to use them all the time for Halloween. So I'm a huge fan of the Atmos team because, and now it makes sense, but like their effects are fantastic. And so, again, for our listeners, what you would do is they make these video clips and it might be like ghosts, and where they're all like kind of translucent and spectral, or they've had like collaborations with Sam from Trick or Treat, or they may have zombies, and so it's these video clips, and then you can either put them on your TV to run while it's during Halloween or whatever. But another use case, as Milko, as you probably know, is that you will use a projector and you'll project them onto your window, and you just have like a little screen or something like that, and then from the outside it looks like zombies are there, or a slasher, or ghosts. And so anyway, so yeah, it's a really, like I said, a really cool product, and a really interesting story about how you've been able to kind of go that direction and the haunt direction, and how
Well, I
that's
mean,
allowed you to make film.
yeah, and the whole thing is, having gone through the whole experience of filmmaking, I was making commercials for some of these haunted houses, so that kind of adapted into, not necessarily shaking hands direct with some of the mask makers, but some of these people like Atmos, or you even have like Moonlight, all these really creatives just like us. That's probably they have their own stories about how they molded their creativity into getting out there. But the more and more that I see is everything is not so much to scare the crap out of people anymore, it's to entertain. And I'll reference the style of Ghosters Phantom Patrol to just that. I'll kind of broaden it. You make a movie to entertain people. Don't bore them. Don't override it. Don't don't become so tagged or politicized. Just entertain. Where people just want to see something, they entertain to switch it off, and the illusions that you create, that's gonna sell the film. That put some heavy thought. I don't think I'm speaking indirectly to filmmakers right now, or just an audience. I think that overall that's what people want to be, is entertained. So if you can manage that and know that, yeah, you got a winner. And again, all the illusions that go into filmmaking is a broad range. You can self-create. Michael and I, we can talk about this later. We just had finished a film this past year where we had to create all the effects because they were so unique, and we couldn't really find anything to match it. So, yeah, but it still has that retro feel. Everything is, because I do create masks as well. I have a company called, it is called Peppered Effects. And that's just, we build miniatures for our films. Like, I don't know, Jonathan, if you said you saw the movie and there was a NORAD scene with the truck going through the tunnel,
Yeah.
that was a miniature. So we built a miniature, and good luck trying to get, an okay to film at NORAD. So
Yeah, that's true.
we created miniatures for the film. Even in Ghosters Phantom Patrol, the parking lot that opened up was a miniature, because you're not going to find a parking lot that opens up on itself.
Yeah, it's one of those things too that, I mean, it takes such a budget to make something convincing and trick the eye if you're going the CG route, right? And so there are so many tried and true practical effects that will achieve the same thing, give you a better look, and and not be as expensive or difficult to pull off. So that is really cool. I did want to. I do want to learn more about some of your upcoming projects, but before that, I was curious. Obviously, this was a film that was, mentioned it filmed 4 years ago during the pandemic, and I'm curious about, because we talked about the aspect of like making the film, the creative process, but maybe Michael, you can speak to this a little bit more. But how has the process been like to get this film distributed, to get it in front of people? What's the challenges been there? Maybe there haven't been. Maybe it was just like kind of getting everything together. But I was hoping you could speak to that.
Oh, there's challenges there. And Milko's done a wonderful job. I know a lot of people. I meet people all the time. Oh, we're making a movie. Well, how long have you been working on it? 4 years. How far are you? Well, we haven't started filming yet. Milko's had varying success with business partners and distributors, and I don't want to mention any names, that sometimes a movie seems to do well, sometimes it doesn't. It's finding somebody who believes in your work, that you can show them a product, you can show them a string of movies of, I can make a movie that is entertaining, like Mick was saying, that something that keeps your attention for the entire time. And I use that as my measure. Am I entertained? Do I look at my watch in it? And if I don't, if I'm just watching the movie and you're like, oh, we're already at the end, that's great. That means that movie has kept me engaged and enough that I'm not worried about the time. So we are with a distributor now that recognizes the ability to deliver on a promise, and even our non-standard scripts and non-standard ideas. He looks at it and he goes, don't show me a script. If I see your script, he goes, I wouldn't have bought Ghosters if I read the script. But seeing the movie, I'm like, wow, you did all this stuff. But if you had just written it, I would have like, you can't do that on that budget.
Yeah, didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead, Milko.
Yeah, the Ghosters Phantom Patrol. It's just kind of unique, and I can't believe it's been 4 years since we filmed it. It's had like multiple struggles before that. We had done a long list of films, right? And I think the hardest thing to recognize when you make a film is people have to know about it. And so like the challenge is, even for us, we don't have the golden key, is that film has to be recognized. Your audience is out there, but if they don't know it exists, it falls away. It just gets chewed up. And the other problem with that is, vetting the people you work with and that they have the same insight that you do and the same vision. We're lucky enough with our reps that they've been working with them, so they've seen the growth, and they see the positivity on the film. So it's like Michael said, they may not even obviously read the script, but they might not get it, but they know we keep on kicking out these interesting films. It just kind of self-evolves into this. I don't even know if we've created a specific kind of like an experimental genre or retrofit. Doesn't necessarily mean it happens in the 80s, but it feels like the 80s, which I'm gearing up to our next film. But as far as Ghosters having taken 4 years, was really not the fact that it took us that long to make. It was just one little issue after the other as far as connecting with the rep, getting him to see it, then waiting for opportunity to market it so that you do get multiple people to see it. And the pandemic didn't help, right? But yeah, it's unbelievable that it took 4 years to get to this point, which is now. And we will have to see what the future holds for Ghosters Phantom Patrol.
Yeah, but I mean, I would definitely say that I think Michael mentioned is that for some folks it takes them 4 years to even get to the starting point, and the fact that you still have you just mentioned that you wrapped up another film. Obviously, you're building up quite a filmography that you can just keep going kind of from one thing to the next. Is definitely inspiring. So it's been really cool to hear about the process to get the film made and get it released. And so, I think what I'd like to hear about a little bit is after our listeners get a chance to check out Ghosters for themselves, what are some of the films that they should be keeping an eye out from the two of you? What do you have on deck?
So I'll kind of springboard it, and then Michael can take over. The movie we just finished is Killer Witches from Outer Space. That is drawn out of one of my favorite campy films in the 80s, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So we finished it. It's what I consider a really cool film. It's got a bunch of action, and we ventured into this crazy film with witches, one that we had to create all the witches and the spiders in, but it was a fun ride. So that is done, and I think its first premiere in theaters will be in Europe in May.
Oh, exciting. That's coming up quick.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how time cycles. And wait, we made another movie? When did we do that? So it just like happened. And then we've got a couple other ideas lined up. Of course, it always comes up to trying to get the fundage for it. And I don't say it's like a huge obstacle. It is. You do need that financial backing for whatever amount it would be, for low budget or higher budget. That kind of sets the pace of, can you pull this off? And if the idea is too grandiose, you're probably going to have to figure a different project that is more affordable. So yeah, we've got a line of crazy stuff.
Yeah, we started a list because we have about 20 ideas for a movie, and we're just kicking them around, and he'll come up with an idea or I'll come up with an idea. So we start bantering back and forth. And as I said, it's whatever resonate, whatever you're like, oh my God, I can see this, I can do this, we can write this. Beginning, middle, end, we've got it. Here we go. We've had scripts that were 75% done that we've scrapped and gone on to the next one because it it the ending didn't fit, or it just we weren't into that point. So it's all about what are you excited about? And that's what's great, is because when we go into these, we're excited about. They're not just projects, they're pet projects, whatever. They're things that we want to see, we want to do, and we want to build upon what we've done in previous movies to do more and more and more. Now, we've had some folks come and make suggestions. Why don't you put in a helicopter chasing a car off a bridge with giant explosions? We're like, that is maybe someday, but that is way outside of our budget and skill range. So one of the great things is knowing our limitations, but still pushing them every single film.
Yeah, that's I mean, I want to thank you both. Milko, thank you, Michael. It's been, like I said, having, seen the film, and I'm excited. I'm excited for our readers and our listeners to check it out. I also think one of the great things about this conversation, though, on top of learning about the film itself, was about learning about your approach to filmmaking. And so, I think you definitely, like, your story is definitely going to be inspiring some of our listeners there who are like, hey, like, I want to make, films for myself. It is important to say, hey, like, maybe, if you're listening and you have an idea for this, like, massive, $200 million, trilogy of movies, maybe, that should be like where you go eventually. But think about, hey, what's something that I can do now? How can I do it? With what I have around me, how can I use my friends and my colleagues to help me? And then, what I really found fascinating too is, like I said, like leveraging things in the haunted attraction industry. How can I come up with creative ideas to achieve these things on a reasonable budget? And the two of you, it doesn't look like you're waiting for things to get to an ideal state. You're not looking for tens of millions of dollars to make your movie. You're making it happen now, and so I think that that's really cool. And I really appreciate you taking the time to tell your story. So, as I mentioned, for our listeners, definitely check out Ghoster's Phantom Patrol. It's available right now for you to watch. And then it also sounds like we'll probably have some news on Killer Witches from Outer Space in the very near future as well. So we'll make sure to follow up on that. Milko, Michael, again, thank you very much. It's been great having you.